Cool. I think we're running live now. Got a few people in the room already, so if you can just drop in the chat to make sure you can hear me okay before we start, and we'll get started in a few minutes. Right, perfect. Well, usually takes a couple of minutes for people to trickle in on webinars like this after we've seen over the last couple of weeks. So I will be with you all shortly. Starting to get a few more people in. Hey, David, how's things? Just waiting for a few more to trickle in, and then we'll get started in a couple of minutes. Hey, everyone, thanks for joining. Just still speaking so everyone knows I'm here, but we'll get cracking in a couple of minutes. A few more people are trickling in at the minute, which is great. Hey, Mick, how you doing? A couple of Marks, Donalds, Davids, Adam Goods. Good to see you here. How's things? We'll wait one more minute and then get started. Okay, hey, everyone else joining at the minute. We're just going to get started in one more minute. Just let the last few people jump into the webinar. Okay, great. Well, I think it's time to get started. So, hello everyone, welcome and thanks for joining me today. Just as a short intro for everyone, I'm Chris and I'm one of the co-founders of Sourcer, and we are a digital marketing and customer experience platform for recruiters. And we really exist to help recruiters stand out above their competitors, improve their retention, and generate more inbound leads through the power of reviews and feedback. And today I'm going to be talking to you about Net PromoterScore and how recruiters and recruitment agencies can use it to grow your business. Firstly, I wanted to start off with a quote, and it's a really great quote I love, which is by a guy called Marty Neumeier. And he says, "A brand is not what you say it is, it's what they say it is." And I have to admit, when I first saw it, I had no idea who this Marty fella was, but he's wrote several books on customer experience and brand. And he's worked with some of the top brands in the world, like Apple and Google, to help them develop their customer and brand strategies. But for me, it really resonates because client or candidate advocacy in recruitment is the number one way that recruiters can generate more leads and ultimately more business. So before I kick on, let's run through the agenda today, and hopefully I'll give you an idea of what you'll learn. So I'll start by explaining actually what NPS is and how that works, and then share with you a couple of recruitment industry NPS insights and another example. why it is actually the most popular framework for measuring service levels, and then how using NPS has a direct impact on your business growth, how you can look at creating an NPS collection strategy for your agency, and then most importantly, how you can actually use that feedback for retention, referrals, and just general service improvement. And then we'll wrap up with a Q&A. So as we're moving through this, anyone ask any questions in the chat or the questions box along the way. And what I'll do at the end is I'll answer as many as I can. Great. So what is NPS? Net Promoter Score is the world's go-to framework for measuring customer satisfaction. And it's the most popular way for brands today globally, including recruitment agencies, to understand their customer loyalty. And it's done with an index ranging from minus 100 to 100. And the index measures the willingness of customers to recommend your services to others. And then this is then used as a proxy for gauging that customer's overall satisfaction with your agency and also your customer's loyalty to your brand. And this is all derived from one simple question. On a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend our service to a friend? And then from that survey, the responses are then bucketed into 3 segments. You have your detractors, passives, and promoters. And your promoters are the people that score you a 9 or a 10. And these are typically loyal customers and enthusiastic advocates of your brand. In the middle, we have your passives, and these are the people who would score you a 7 or 8. And they're actually satisfied with your service, but potentially not happy enough to be considered promoters. And finally, at the other end of the spectrum, anyone who scores you a 0 to 6 is what's called a detractor. And these are your unhappy customers who are unlikely to buy from you again. And even more importantly, may actually even discourage others in their network from buying from you. And finally, this is bundled into your overall Net Promoter Score. And your Net Promoter Score is the percentage of promoters minus the percentage of detractors from the surveys that you send. And I want to give you a bit of context to this in our industry, in our recruitment industry. And as recruiters, what we're looking for is ultimately more candidates applying to the roles that we're working on and more clients inquiring about our services. And one of the biggest challenges we have as an industry is actually standing out and differentiating ourselves from the thousands of other recruiters and agencies out there. And a couple of big businesses from the US, CareerBuilder and Innovero, they actually run an interesting survey each year to look at the Net Promoter Score for our industry. And they do this by surveying about 3,000 industry customers. And you can see in the graph on the right, on the blue line, the Net Promoter Score from the industry has dropped from plus 33 all the way down to minus 2 in 2019. Which means, unfortunately, there are a lot of people out there with a negative perception of recruiters. And added to that challenge, unfortunately, is a lot of recruitment agencies look and sound the same. So another question that they ask recruitment agency leaders is how they feel that they're different from others. And guess what? Everybody says the same thing. 90% claim to deliver higher service levels than everybody else. And 73% say that they're better because their staff are better than everyone else's. So if everybody's saying the same thing, how do you actually prove you're different? And this is why today, customer feedback and customer experience is so important for a modern day agency. Another great example that really establishes the importance of good candidate experience is one from Virgin. So this was a few years ago, but Virgin Media did a really interesting study on candidate experience and then looked at their Net Promoter Score across this. It actually turned out that about 2/3 of their rejected candidates from process were detractors based on NPS. And then furthermore, because of this poor candidate experience, 5% of those rejected candidates were actually cancelling their services with Virgin, which resulted in a revenue loss of just over 6 million annually, which is massive. And look, whilst we're not all Virgin money, it's still a really good example of the wider damage it can cause. Nowadays, the cost of acquiring new customers is about 5 times higher than retaining an existing one. And these are just some of the many reasons why implementing Net Promoter Score into your customer experience flow is more important than ever before. And hopefully today I can give you some ideas of some best practices and how you can think about this for you and your agency. So why is NPS so popular? There are a lot of frameworks out there. You can see it on the graph on the right. We have CSAT, CES, and a few other anagrams. And there's even some unusual bespoke KPIs or scores out there. But when it comes to customer service, NPS trumps them all, because it doesn't just measure your loyalty rather and provide you with valuable feedback. It also gives you signals and predictability. And those signals are about churn, retention, and most importantly, revenue. And there's a few reasons why. Its simplicity is actually designed to maximize response. So your customers can leave their answers on the go without being overwhelmed or fatigued by dozens of questions that are often about the company and not actually about their opinion. And because of its popularity, it's now globally recognizable. So that means your customers are familiar with it and they understand it, which means they're more likely to actually leave their response. But furthermore, which I think is the most important factor, NPS is actually directly correlated with revenue. And interestingly, the London School of Economics did some research on this, and they actually found for B2B businesses like recruiters, an average increase of 7% in your NPS correlates with a 1% growth in income. So we can see the impact that it has on revenue there. And for recruiters, brand and reputation is key. There's a direct correlation between providing a good candidate or client experience and revenue growth. And retention itself equals growth. And the simplest way to paint this picture is with a couple of stats. 1 in 26 unhappy customers complain, and the rest churn. And then leading on for this, the number one reason customers leave is because they actually feel that they're no longer valued. And what I mean by customer is I actually mean both your clients and your candidates. So if you answer this, if you didn't ask for any of this feedback, how would you or your agency have any visibility on this whatsoever? And I've actually been lucky to speak to a fellow called Andrew Banks about our product specifically. And Andrew founded a recruitment agency called Morgan and Banks, and I believe they were the largest ever recruitment agency in APAC. But nowadays, you may be more familiar with him as one of the sharks and investors off Shark Tank. But less about him. It's more about one thing he said that struck to me, and I think it's really important to highlight that for recruiters and agency owners. The number one source of referrals and growth for a recruitment agency is a happy customer. So by creating a proactive feedback loop, it actually helps you identify weaknesses before they ever become issues before your business. It gives you the opportunity to address any negative experiences customers may have had. And you're also making them feel valued at the same time. And this gives you the opportunity to retain those customers before you potentially lose them to a competitor. So how can you actually create a solid NPS collection strategy for your business? And it's interesting, we've done some feedback on this, and the feedback as to why most agencies don't do it is because it's time consuming and it's just too hard. But then because of this, it's common that unsuccessful candidates are less likely to be followed up. But if you don't, you're actually not protecting your brand. And you're also impacting your opportunity to build talent pools of that rejected talent, even though it may still be qualified. There are a couple of tips that I can recommend here. So you've got to build a continuous feedback loop. So that means gathering feedback on a regular basis, but then also creating a 360 loop on it with your responses and actions based on that feedback. An example of this with Sourcer. So with Sourcer as our product, you can collect NPS feedback on any interactions with your clients and candidates, but then also segment this across the business. And you can segment that by job category, by outcome, or even down to consultant, and then benchmark that against the wider group and get the real insights. But there's plenty of other examples out there. Another example would be potentially sending a link to an NPS survey in your own emails or comms, and you can do this via your ATS or CRM. And if you can do this in an automated way, you can actually save time and create more consistency. But either way, I think it's important to understand that using a feedback software really helps you visualize and get value from the information, and then actually create a workflow and a plan of action with it. And then once your feedback's received from your NPS, it's then segmented into those three buckets based on the response. So you have the promoters, the passives, or detractors of your brand. And then this segmentation actually allows you to create a closed loop of dialogue and then customize that dialogue based on the satisfaction level of the customer. And then just by doing this alone, you can then work towards championing customer loyalty across your agency and also driving a better service-based culture. To truly build trust with your customers, the final steps to develop a strategy and framework so you can create that loop of improvement. And I know the word strategy often scares people, but it doesn't have to be complex. It's more about making that commitment to improve or act on your findings. This diagram here is one that I love, and it's a really good representation of a closed loop, and it can ensure you build much stronger relationships with your clients. So looking at the example in the top right, we've already gone through this step, which is basically collecting that feedback and receiving it. The next step is categorizing, which NPS already does for you as a framework, and that segments it into those buckets based on their response. And the final two steps of the loop, step 3 and step 4, is to actually act on the feedback you've received and then respond. So, for example, here, if the client or candidate was a promoter, this is a really good indicator for you to ask for a referral. And you can actually build an automated workflow for this. And the more personalized that is, the better. And this can be a huge driver of growth for you and your business. But on the complete other hand, if this person was a detractor, it's important to flag this to the manager and the consultant and really address it proactively to change their experience. And this can significantly increase your chance of retention. And then throughout all this process and feedback, you've got to look for consistencies in that feedback across the business. And this can help you identify areas of improvement or even areas of excellence that you can share with the wider team. Communicate this with your team and communicate it with your customers. So, for example, for those that have left the feedback, where you've made a change in your service because of it, let them know personally you took it on board. And you'll be surprised by doing this, they'll feel super valued and even more loyal to your brand. But it doesn't have to stop there. All this information can be shared with managers and frontline staff to help grow your business. A service-based culture is critical to stand out above your competitors. And some examples of this can be rewarding your top performers, and you'll instantly see the results, not only with customer retention, but actually with also motivating the staff and energizing the team with KPIs that measure the relationships with their customers rather than how many times they pick up the phone. So in summary today, I've discussed the why and how of NPS, how you can use it in your agency, and how you can create a feedback loop to drive more retention and more referrals. And really that's what it's about. Now is a really good time to start setting up your first NPS campaigns. Things are obviously a bit quieter than normal for most, and it's a really good opportunity for you to reconnect with old clients and candidates and understand how they actually felt about the experience of working with you and the team. But if anyone wants any more tailored advice on this and how you can potentially set up and run your first NPS campaigns, feel free to shout out to me on LinkedIn, or you can drop me an email to chris@saucer.com. We're actually also running an offer at the minute. So Saucer is completely free for 3 months. And we're doing that to try and help agencies during this COVID pandemic. So if you wanted to explore how this works with Saucer as well, please let me know. And that brings me to the end. So next steps, we'll jump into questions from the audience if anyone has any. One second. The questions have seemed to have disappeared. Cool. So we've got a question coming from Mark here. How can you gather more insights from NPS than a survey? I assume that means a survey of multiple questions, and yeah, it's a good question. And there's really a few aspects to it. So NPS as a whole is really simple and affordable to implement. And because of that, its results are super easy to comprehend, which means when you're sharing them with your team, they're much more digestible and understandable. And secondly, because it's actually quicker to complete, it ensures most of your customers actually won't mind doing it. So your response rate is going to be higher. And the better your response rate, the more data you have and the better insight you've got. And lastly, you've got to remember that NPS surveys are just about starting that conversation with your customer. And then you can continue to find out more about what their needs and wants are, customized based on what their overall happiness was from that initial question. Hopefully that answers that for you. We've got one from David here. When has NPS become so relevant to recruitment? Look, I think it's not only recruitment it's become relevant for, it's been used widely across a lot of professional services for years now, and we've seen a significant spike in it through other NPS softwares like Ask Nicely, Delighted. There are 100 out there at the moment. So really, if we think about recruitment agencies as a whole, recruitment agencies are a very service-led business, and NPS is perfect for trying to establish the happiness of the service levels with your customers. So I think that's a real factor of why it's become more popular versus any of the other metrics and performance indicators that are out there. Cool. Do you have any more? My chat seems to have disappeared. Sorry, guys. So we got another one from another David here. What process do you propose to use to get a good response to an NPS survey? Well, I think we probably got to look at this from a different angle. It's not necessarily about getting a good response from the survey. It's more designing a process within your recruitment agency to make sure that they are happy with the service they receive. So when you're looking at that candidate experience, that comes first, and then the NPS, the score on the NPS becomes after that. So you're really looking to use NPS to identify any real holes in your service levels, so you can use that as an improvement metric. So ultimately, in the future, your NPS increases. So it's really a benchmark for the agency as a whole. And what you can then do is start to segment that across teams or even outcomes. So looking to see where your NPS score lies across different categories of jobs that you work in. Hopefully that answers your question. Yes, exactly. So there's a couple of ways that you can send the survey. You can either send it by email, and you can send it by message. Typically, the best way for recruiters to take advantage of NPS is doing what's called a transactional NPS workflow. So sending the surveys immediately after the service that you provided. So for example, if a candidate has been in a workflow and unfortunately they were unsuccessful with a job that they applied for, at the end of that process, sending them an email is the best chance that you're going to get for a response, and also the best chance that you're going to get for an honest response. So that's probably the best way to do that. Your response to, yeah, so look, David, I'm happy to have a chat with you about that, how you can increase response rates. But I think, the timeliness of it is a big part of it. But then there's also other little tweaks that you can do to send reminders or even create a much more optimized email to make sure that they respond to that. So if you want to get in touch with me and chat to me more specifically about your NPS process, more than happy to help with that and see what we can do to improve it. Yeah, we got one from Mark. Absolutely, and that customized workflow is really important to creating that closed loop. So, for example, with Source's platform, depending on whether you get a promoter, a detractor, or a passive person leaving you a response, you can create a workflow off the back of that that's personalized and better suited to that response. So I think, as I said in the example in the webinar, if you have a promoter, it's actually a really good opportunity for you to encourage them to refer you to any of their colleagues or friends. But on the flip side, if you have a detractor, that's your opportunity to be proactive about that, get them on the phone, understand what went wrong, and win them back as actually an advocate for your business. Cool. We've got Nicole next. What tips would you recommend for introducing NPS to our team, as well as the clients and candidates? Yeah, good question. I do really think it starts with the software. So there's a bunch of NPS softwares out there, and Sourcer does it as well. But without using a software, you really restrict your visibility and ability to actually use that information. So the most important part of NPS isn't necessarily just sending out the surveys, it's being able to gather all the data that you get back in a way that you can use it to improve your service levels or proactively reach out to those clients and candidates. I think, the introduction of it, whatever you do with your NPS, you've got to make sure that you set it up in a transactional way. So, we've seen a few people previously where their NPS campaigns maybe just once a year. So they'll upload all their clients and candidates into a list, and everyone from the last 12 months that they've ever spoken to will receive an NPS. And you're going to get lower response rates, and you're going to get worse data on that, essentially. If you do it in a transactional way where you can actually send those surveys based on when the service is finished with them, you're going to get the higher response rates and you're going to get more honest feedback. So they're the two main tips that I'd recommend, Nicole. Cool. It looks like they're all the questions for today, and there's some great questions there. But as I said, if you do have any more questions specifically about your NPS or what you can do to improve it, please my words wrong. Please feel free to reach out to me, and I'm more than happy to advise on that. Great. Well, thanks everyone for listening. There will be a recording going out through Webinar Ninja the next day. So if you have anyone else you do wish to share this with, please feel free to share them, and everyone enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks. Goodbye.